The recommendations were to have better governance structure, develop strategic aims, be more effective and cohesive, have sufficient resources and meet all statutory functions, and manage and scrutinise performance. So from that we've had an action plan developed, which we are midway through delivering. So we have delivered the actions to date that we've been required to do so, which has included a complete consultation with our partners, strategic partners across the Community Safety Partnership Board, and a revision of our terms of reference. And the next stage will be to redevelop our strategies and develop our strategic aims. So as you can see from the report, in section 3 looks at our strategic assessments. Currently our priorities in the CSP are young people linked to knife crime, personal robbery, retail business crime, domestic abuse, exploitation of young people and hate crime. The performance summary can be found in Appendix 4. Some of the highlights is that we can see personal robbery has seen a reduction by 32.5% in Rugby, compared with the county average increase of 12.7%. We have been seeing reductions in reportable domestic abuse, but work is being done between police, RBC, the County Council and Refuge in relation to development of how people can report domestic abuse. We've worked closely with our partners across Warwickshire, in particular around hate crime and attending the Safer Warwickshire Big Conversation. And we've worked in a number of operations in relation to child exploitation in conjunction with the police and other partners. So just a couple of highlights from this year's work. So we've really been focusing on our youth intervention to reduce the numbers of ASB from young people across the borough. We've seen a much better cohesion between partners again in relation to that. So we have a monthly meeting where all the partners meet to discuss individuals, and we've developed a number of intervention programs. So we've given identify young people who may be at need or may be at risk of poor behaviour, provided them with intervention. And actually over the summer we've had a joint partnership working operation with the police and our on-track youth team, patrolling hotspots of ASB, and we've seen quite a decline in particularly youth ASB within the town centre over this summer compared to last summer. So it's been certainly a success with the targeted patrols, the working we've done in partnership, and the interventions we've been offering out. We've been running a violence against women, a couple of campaigns which was launched at the Rugby Light Switch On in relation to Enough campaign. The details can be found in the report. We've been getting good feedback from the public in relation to that, and we had another community engagement event just Saturday gone where we were advertising the Enough campaign. The final part I would like just to talk about is around Safer Streets funding. So we were successfully, with our partners across Warwickshire and the Police and Crime Commissioner, granted money through the Safer Streets 4 funding. We've seen improvements around the St Andrew's Gardens area on Church Street, which has included additional CCTV, lighting, and upgrades to other CCTV cameras in the area. We've had an engagement day on Saturday in relation to that work, and the feedback so far was that everybody's very positive about that work, and actually that area has been, people feel much safer walking through those areas, particularly at night time. So that's probably as much as, obviously the report is there, that's probably just the highlights of it. Happy to answer any questions along with colleagues in relation to the work the Community Safety Partnership has done.
Henry, thank you very much for that report, and it's in front of you. Can I ask the members if they wish to raise any question to Henry or the officers sitting at the back? Councillor Livesey.
Hi, I think this is a really good report in terms of the description of the activity that's taken place over the last year. I think where it falls down is on its impact. I'm particularly concerned about the violence against women and girls. What impact has all of that activity had? How many people have visited those web pages? Have we looked to see whether the web pages need to be redesigned in order to attract more people to visit it? But I think in general terms, the impact of all of this activity is lacking in this report, and I would like to see more. We're here to scrutinise it. How can we tell if that activity is successful or not if we haven't got the tools in front of us to see that?
Thank you. Henry, you want to respond?
Yeah, I think part of the review from the CSP is actually we need to have measurable outcomes of the work we've been doing. So that's part of the strategy which we're developing now, and we recognise actually that we don't have very good outcomes from what the work we do. But we're getting much better at gathering the data now. We're getting much better, particularly around the youth intervention. But I take on board what you've said about the VORG work. All of the work we need to be able to measure, and we need to be able to outcomes. So from now, when we're developing work streams now, we're actually looking ahead. So we're making sure we've got outcomes and what we want, the measurables, so we can actually do that. So I take that on board, and I agree. And that's been part of the review, is to make sure that we do that moving forwards.
David, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think, as you'll have seen from other parts of the report, we're at an early stage when it comes to performance management or good performance management within the council. So, as Henry has pointed out, this is just the start. I fully accept the fact that we need to improve that, and we will. In terms of the general impact, I think there's two things that were key. First, we were one of the ones that, along with lots of other local authorities, but we were one of the first ones to actually take some action. And one of the key actions that we took was to actually ask the public. You know, that input is critical to this. There's an assumption amongst many professionals that we know best and this sort of thing. That's not true. The public were very important in that, and Mike is here with me, so I want to say thank you to him because he was involved in the survey. And it showed that we were looking at some really key areas, some areas that actually nobody had really recognised before, and so we've been able to target those things specifically, and a lot of resource and effort has been put into it. And as Henry said, the evidence so far is that we've got lots of positive feedback from it. Thank you.
Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you. Just to follow on from your statement there, what were the areas that you hadn't identified before?
It was the fact that there was an assumption that things like late night was the biggest problem, and that town centre was also likely to be one of the main problems. Parts of the town centre were, because there were areas where people felt unsafe. But one of the things that we hadn't recognised was the fact that people tend to follow people around in places like supermarkets, really open public spaces. There were comments about public roads. So when women and girls were walking along, they would get the traditional wolf whistling and all of this sort of thing. And it was trying to identify which areas those sort of things were happening, etc., so that we can target those particular things. There's going to be a major education issue across, it's a national issue, and that has already started. But, you've got to have that starting point. But unless you know quite where those problems are, we couldn't target it. Hence, we have carried out work at supermarkets, with pubs and so on, and also with warden patrols in areas where they'd shown elevated levels.
So, Mrs. Brown.
Thank you, and thanks for the report. It's really full and makes a very interesting read. It's marrying those two things together that I'm interested in. So you've got views from the public and info from the public. It's like an impression of where things are and where resourcing should be targeted. Given the investment that's made in the strategies to put things right, it's measuring how much effect that's had. And I was really pleased to hear that we're having these two sides. So you've got the public input, ours as well, and the general intelligence, but you've also got some evidence base that you're measuring. So it's not just, we think it might be a bit better because we've not had so many complaints. And I think that makes a big difference. Thank you.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you. And that public consultation and involving the community more is one of the council's priorities. We need to be a customer-led authority, and that work is in place and can only get better in my view.
So Lisa Parker and then Councillor Mrs. Mackenzie.
What controls do you have in place for replicating the survey to ensure that only local residents are responding? Because the problem with putting any online survey out is that links get shared, and your experience in Perry Bar or, you know, the West End of London is very different, even though you might have links to Rugby, of being in those places. So what assurances can we have, if there are any assurances? And I think you're going to answer that there are none, but that those are local people responding to genuinely local concerns. And I'm not minimising the effect of harassment in any situation or in any location, but I think in order to look at local problems, we need to make sure that we're looking at local responses.
Okay, thank you, David. Thank you, Councillor Parker. It's very insightful, and it's true that actually it's very challenging to geographically restrict respondents without an element of honesty from those respondents, because the truth is that when the consultants, the consultation and the engagement goes out, that we ask for Rugbyians that live in the Rugby area to respond to that. There are technical ways that we can restrict that, but that in itself becomes a technical problem, because there are Rugbyians that want to respond from their mobile phones that could be in any place whatsoever, and we don't want to prevent people responding. So that's a long way around of agreeing with you that there are things that we can do to shut down people responding outside of Rugby, but we probably shouldn't, because the effect of that would be to shut down some real respondents.
Thank you. I just wanted to raise a point about antisocial behaviour stroke disorder in the town centre. I don't want to take away anything from the work of the community wardens, because I think they do an excellent job, and you know, I'm very pleased that you're recruiting another community warden. I just wonder the big drop in incidents, how much the weather has played a part in that, because we haven't had extended periods of hot evening weather, which encourages people to be outside. We've had quite a lot of rain actually this summer, and I just wonder, are we just going to seesaw our statistics a bit and therefore feel a bit disheartened next summer if we have a hotter summer? And I just wanted to kind of see if that was in your thinking at all.
I think that's a very fair point, Councillor, and thank you for raising it. I think what we're currently doing at the moment is as I say, we're developing the data, so we're actually mapping all of this now. So we've got quite complex mapping systems, so we can actually, since the start of this year, we're mapping all where the hotspots are, how many incidents are occurring. So we are getting better at gathering the data. That's the first part of it, so we can understand what's going on, and we can look at see if these seasonal changes or weather and things affect that. I think we started off the summer holidays probably in slight, as we do most years, a little bit concerned, but we have done a lot of work with the young people who have been identified to be potentially at risk of causing antisocial behaviour, at risk of criminality. So we've already targeted a number of the individuals through our joint work in partnership meetings with the schools, with our community wardens, with our on-track services. So I think actually we're kind of aware of who was causing those problems, and we've kind of tackled them. So we're quite quick now at identifying those individuals, those young people, or whoever it is that's causing the antisocial behaviour, and taking early steps to try and tackle that behaviour. So actually I think what we saw at the start of the summer holidays was we were out with our colleagues, the community wardens, were out with our colleagues within the police, doing the joint patrols on the hotspot areas, and we were picking up some behaviours, and we were picking up some of the issues going on, and we were just talking to the young people, we were identifying who those individuals were. At the same time, we were funding our youth outreach services through granting from the Police and Crime Commissioner to actually go out and do some outreach work. And at the start of the summer holidays, the police and the community wardens were the busy guys. By the end of the summer holidays, actually what we saw is everybody had migrated to the youth outreach guys, because they found there's something to do there. Let's go and do that. That's a good activity. So I think I agree with you. The weather probably is is our friend. It's a policeman's friend, isn't it? Bad weather. It's a traditional saying, but I actually think that there's been a lot of work that's been done to prevent that reoccurrence of the town centre behaviour. I think there's a lot of other issues which have helped us, and I think there was the last 2 years we came out of COVID. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that young cohort that came out of lockdown, they hadn't had the socialisation, they hadn't had the freedoms that a number of people had, and I think that we saw quite a lot of spike of young people causing ASB as we came out of those lockdowns, and I think that's changed as well. They're getting more, they're being engaged with, we're providing services for them. So I do think what the work we've done has made a fundamental difference, but what we will identify through the mapping and the work we're doing moving forwards is actually what the seasonal peaks are, whether it's the hot weather, whether it's the work we're doing. So that's the information we're gathering now, so we can make sure that it doesn't occur in the future, or we're better equipped to know how to deal with it in the future.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to respond with a couple of points. One, to the valid point that Councillor Parker made, and also the response from Mike on the survey. One suggestion would be that the simplest way of making sure that the local responses are from locals is to literally, and you can still anonymise this, keep or request a postcode to be put in before the survey is carried out. At least then you've got a Rugby postcode, and then you know it's a local comment, a local person. On the point that Chief Officer David Borough has made about areas that were surprising when it comes to community safety, such as supermarkets and public houses, I made a particular point only because our 20-year-old daughter does work part-time, almost full-time, because she's saving for university, at the merchants in the town centre. And I've spoken to a number of landlords. They have issues, as you're well aware. They would be, those that I spoke to, including James at the merchants, would be more than willing to take part in a leaflet activity to enable anyone that's in an environment like that at the time to pick up something and respond, because there have been a number of issues against females from males, which are, in my view, as a parent of two daughters, disturbing, and one that works in a fairly senior position at the pub. In fact, there was an example where three individuals were actually three male individuals were in drinking. My daughter asked them that they will serve them once, but they'd had too much, one drink, and as soon as they'd finished, they should go. They ignored her. They ignored her female colleague. They ignored her female colleague. And it wasn't until the male landlord, who had a day off, a night off, who happened to live upstairs, was asked to come down, then they listened. And that is wrong. And that should be corrected. It should be something like this that we could help to correct. And I think pubs in the town centre are really important.
Thank you, Councillor. I completely agree with you. We've done quite a lot of work pre-Christmas with the hospitality, particularly in the town centre, and we've been to their pub watch meetings. We've offered them anti-drink spiking devices, which isn't always the issue. I realise that, but it helps to protect vulnerable young people, particularly females, in the pub and the hospitality scenarios. I think some of the behaviour is what we need to try and change, but I think that's a set change rather than necessarily something like campaigning. Obviously, we can help them with the campaign in the Ask Angela stuff. They've all been signed up just to the Ask Angela scheme. We are looking at using a scheme called Best Bar None within Rugby, which was through our county colleagues and our licensing team. And again, some of those things, they're basically pubs which sign up to schemes such as Ask Angela to make sure that pubs are actually implementing their licensing conditions, additional things to actually make sure that the environment which the pub is is better for the customers. So that's something that's currently being worked upon and to be offered out to the hospitality premises across Rugby, particularly in the town centre. And it's successfully working in Warwick at the moment. So yeah.
That's very good to hear, and I was aware of the Warwick scheme, and it is really good to hear that, because landlords in the town centre do need our support, and I think it's good. It is a step change. I think it's right that the Borough Council should support landlords not only in the town centre but across the borough, and provide that support for them, because it is an issue in the town centre. Thank you.
Mrs. James.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to discuss knife crime, because your December 22 figures show that there was a rise in incidents in knife crime with young people, and I'd like to know where those figures have gone in the last 9 months, because December 22 to September 23 makes 9 months in my book. So where are we, and what sort of campaigns are we doing to tackle this? And particularly, is there any relationship to any drug issues or drug supply within Rugby? That is not talked about in the report at all, which I would have liked to have seen, because obviously that has an impact and goes through to ASB, goes through to the knife crime, goes through to all the actions that follow. And there's absolutely no mention of it in the report. Could I please have an explanation for that?
Chief Inspector Rankin.
Thank you for your question. I just want to talk about drug crime. I specifically don't like to talk about drug crime in the borough. That's because drugs is a competitive market, and if other drug dealers knew the sort of work we were doing, it might encourage them to come into our market and tap into the potential of buyers. So my request of the Community Safety Partnership, I get your concerns, I have them too, but publicising and speaking about them in an open forum, I think could be detrimental to the safety of the people at Rugby. I hope that makes sense, and I'm not trying to brush you off around that, but I'm saying I don't want to publicly...
Yes, go on.
I'm not asking for detail, I'm just asking for the top-line figures. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, to understand what is happening in Rugby in relation to our young people. Because quite honestly, I can take you to where all those Knox canisters are that we can't dispose of through our recycling centres or anything else. I can take you to all of the other places that have issues in rural areas as well as in the town. And I just think top-line figures would have been helpful to us councillors in how we take that forward and help you as a Community Safety Partnership to deliver it for this town.
Thank you, I understand that. And my top-line figure is showing me that drug offences in Rugby are up 15% year to date. However, I know I've put a heck of a lot of effort and enforcement into those drug offences, and we wouldn't have known about them. So saying what that figure is really, really hard to pin down, because I've found a heck of a lot more drugs than I had last year, because I've got a heck of a lot more resource put towards it. So it's a real hard chicken and egg scenario for me. All I can assure you is drug crime is a massive priority for Rugby Police. I have a dedicated team on it all the time, and whenever we get an opportunity to take people away that have got drugs, we do, and we rely on the Community Safety Partnership to look at education and the youth intervention to get people away from that attractive drug industry. It is something that is really hard to talk about and blow our own trumpet without encouraging a drug trade to increase in the town.
I understand that, but we do see the reports. We do see when you catch certain people and all of this kind of thing. So we do see some of that, and I just wanted to understand what that was in relation to Rugby. So thank you for the top line figure. I appreciate that. Can we go back to my first question on knife crime?
Obviously, if we need more detail, then we can get it and we can provide an answer in writing. What we have included in the report is a summary of the crimes that are happening within the borough and whether they're going up and down. I will not say that, knife crime continues to be one of our priorities, and we have been doing a lot of work with the police identifying those groups of children that are particularly involved in it, so we've targeted those individuals. We've also been doing a lot of work with support from the whole partnership, and this is the key to this. This is the partnership in places like schools, so that we can actually get funding for it. We can get people that can go in and start talking to kids, because it is there does seem to be a number of people, young people, who believe they have to carry knives to stay safe. That culture we are trying to address at the moment, but the outlet or the key statistics are in there, but we're happy to provide you with more detail about specific issues if that would help.
Chair, I think, could I come back? I just think that because this is an annual report and it ends at December 22, the data sheet, I think it just would have been more helpful to have a bit more up-to-date information on that, to see the trend of where it's going.
I'm happy to take that criticism, Councillor. This was originally due to come in March, and we were using some of the figures from there. So that report, apologies, wasn't updated. Most of the other information was updated when it was delayed because of PERDA, etc. But I do apologise for that, and we can provide more up-to-date reports. That's not a problem.
Councillor Mrs. Livesey.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask on this data table. I was trying to understand the RAG rating on it, and obviously I understand what a RAG rating is, but then I got a bit puzzled when I found that amber was in place for example, violence with injury, and the percentage change for rugby is in amber, and the percentage change for the county is also in amber. So I'm just wondering what is being measured against what. And then the other thing that I wanted to ask is, why are we having this set against the county rather than against our statistical neighbours? Because obviously the county has a huge rural area with very, very different social structures to rugby, although we do also have a lot of rural areas too. But it might be more helpful if we could see stuff against our statistical neighbours.
So the statistical data is produced by the Warwickshire analysts at the Warwickshire Community Safety Partnership, so they work with us to develop this. I can provide you with the information behind what's being measured and what it is. I can't give you that explanation right now, so I can provide you that with you if that's okay. The reason why it's done within Warwickshire, again, is because it's a Warwickshire-wide, so the Warwickshire average is worked out and then rugby's worked out alongside it. So they do the whole of the statistics for Warwickshire, and then rugby's compared to that. Now, it's a fair comment that we could look at data from our other surrounding areas. I think if you look at areas like Nuneaton, Warwick, Stratford, although yes, they are rural, but they still have quite big town urban centres, similar to rugby. I appreciate not exactly the same and demographically different. We would have to reach out to our partners within other community safety partnerships or across borders to be able to get that data. Something we can explore and doing, but it'd obviously have to be able to provide us with that data. So that's something we could look at.
Just to sort of answer Councillor Timms, just to comment on knife crime. I visit schools, youth clubs, youth organisations, and I always ask them, what or why do either you or your friends or colleagues, why would you think of even carrying a knife? And sadly, about 95%, probably more, it makes me feel safer. Now that is a societal problem, and I think schools, parents, youth organisations, police, councillors, we all have a responsibility to make our children as safe as we possibly can. And one of the things is not to be carrying a knife.
Chair, if I may. I have the monthly copy from Warwickshire every month. I send that to the opposition leaders. Whether they send it to you as councillors, I don't know. But the figures for the borough are on there, and all the other districts every month.
Thank you, everybody. Can I just ask for the chair? It's nice to have CSP working as a team, because when you read it, the scope, it's so wide, Warwickshire controls a far wider brief, if that's worry, and they encompass it. So for the guest, I think, in a way, we need to be proactive rather than reacting to whatever's happening. So prevention is probably a better way of looking at it. And, you pick up a lot of issues. I wouldn't call it soft crime, but for example, if in an area there is a high crime where high-value cars are stolen very quickly, and people expectation, the crowd, that your team is, active doing something, and when say for example, I think recently 5 cars were stolen in the last couple of weeks, and the reaction that came from the police at the time is to the residents, the car is probably ended up in Europe or somewhere, and get a crime number and deal with the insurance. So that's probably the easy one. So I'll give you all the questions that needs to be done. The other one is that I get quite a lot coming from ethnic minority group. Hate crime is recorded in Rugby for 2023. There are figures there. How many of them are taken to court, and if they are actually prosecuted? Because I know the process is long. It's nice to know we have this, and people looking for outcomes. If you don't see outcome what it is, then you get into worry. And the other one is that this is I call it soft crime, is the ASB hotspot generally covers Ben Ward and Eastland, which is, the town centre for us in Rugby. So in terms of all the recorded ESBO, how many are actually taken a meaningful action against to say, we've addressed something and the perpetrators have been dealt with? I'll leave it at that at the moment.
Yes, I'll come in on part of this because obviously it's the partnership we're discussing, and it's probably unfair for putting Chief Inspector Rankin right on the spot. But I'm sure if he wants to, he will come back and comment on those sort of things. When it comes to things like ASB, it's a difficult one when it comes to performance management, because as Henry's pointed out, actually we want to be proactive. The majority of our work in the partnership is to try to prevent things and give people alternative things to do. So serving notices on people, etc., probably isn't a good indicator of performance. It's probably a good indicator where it's the last resort, because that's where the tool can play a key part. So we have got statistics on when it comes to things like antisocial behaviour. We've got all those recorded. We take action on all of them. We try to get interventions on those people that are causing it. There is a specific committee that we hold as part of the Community Safety Partnership that looks at trying to find positive outcomes for these individuals. So that's where the majority of it is. So we can certainly provide you on information on things like notices. I think it's even in our key statistics that we publish now on a quarterly basis, which will be getting better as part of our performance management process. But certainly we take things like ASB extremely seriously, and that is something that certainly the community wardens can play a very active part in. I never underestimate the value of our wardens. The Rugby Borough Council has uniquely invested in them for many years, and they provide a key service in providing protection for the public, but also finding positive outcomes for the community. So I hope you're reassured that we take it seriously and we do put those efforts in there. Thank you.
Okay, so I've written down the things I think you've asked about. So antisocial behaviour, you've asked how many incidents we've had and how many we've had a positive outcome for. So because we don't record antisocial behaviour as a crime, if it's got a separate crime, we will deal with that crime. That isn't easy for me to pick out those figures, but I've brought with me year-to-date figures that are up to date as of yesterday. So it's comparing everything this year to date, starting April the 1st up till now, to the previous year from April the 1st up till now. I can show that overall crime in Rugby is down 10.3%, that's over 900 victims of crime less in the 5 months this year till now, as opposed to the 5 months last year. And I think that probably helps with the ASB type stuff, because it's not something we measure on an individual basis. It probably does feed into why overall crime's down. It feeds into the drugs work as well, why overall crime's down, and the preventative work of the CSP especially. You mentioned about vehicle crime, and actually Rugby's doing really well for vehicle crime. We're 22.5% down year to date than where we were last year, and we've done a lot of preventative work in the police around high valued vehicles, where we see a series starting to develop in Warwickshire and wider. We will contact those people and say, do you know your car is likely to be targeted by criminals, and we'll directly go to them and provide anti-theft devices and advice, certainly alongside the neighbourhood watch as well, who help us with that. And that's, I think, responsible for preventing crime. We're also going out there and nicking people. Rugby Police, we've almost doubled the amount of arrests per month since I've come in April than we were doing prior to my arrival at the Borough. So I've really driven a positive attitude amongst the officers to arrest people. Plus, we've obviously had the police uplift programmes, so we've got more resources and various other matters as well that have allowed us to focus on making arrests and putting people in jail. And I'd like to think that that's made a difference on the figures. I genuinely do. And finally, you mentioned about hate crime. I really like the way Rugby works. I like we've got a really diverse area and a quite well integrated. I see very few issues of real significant community tension between different groups of all different walks of life. We don't really have that. We have isolated incidents. Hands down, we have about 4 a week, but we don't have really big tension that we're aware of in the police that I know some of my colleagues in other parts of the county and wider do. And I think that's a real testament to the way Rugby operates and the people of Rugby. Our hate crime figures would show me that we're down 29% this year to where we were last year. And that's recorded hate crime to Warwickshire Police. I actually don't have figures on outcomes on that, and I've made a note that I really should. I should see what we do in terms of prosecuting. I know that we have a hate crime prosecutor. Hate crime is treated more seriously in the first 24 hours by the police, and a hate crime must be reviewed by an inspector or above within the first 24 hours that it's recorded to make sure that there's real impetus behind a criminal investigation and safeguarding of people that are subjected to hate crime. So I know we do that work, but I've written on here already, I must take this away about figures because it would be a good figure to share, I think, with our councillors and with our communities. Thank you.
For that assurance and to hear the figures as well. Councillor Raven.
Thank you, Chair. The one other point that I wanted to make on this report and on the data sheet, which is, in my view, hugely disturbing but not surprising given we've come through a pandemic, is that of domestic abuse. It's a huge rise. There's a rise across the county and other towns and indeed nationally. But I just wanted to check to see if there are any fresh projects or initiatives that we've got coming through.
Thank you, Councillor Raven. So yeah, there has been there was an increase, particularly as we came out of the pandemic. As you can imagine, domestic violence was a strange one in the pandemic because people were locked together. So we did see changes in figures, and it's sort of scoped out at sort of pre-pandemic levels now to an extent. But there is a lot of work. Particularly in Rugby, we feel that there's an under-reporting within Rugby, actually, rather than the figures have gone down, if that makes sense. So there's quite a lot of work, and we're looking at campaigning with our colleagues at Warwickshire County Council, working with our colleagues in the police, even within the Borough Council, within organisations, actually, how we can make sure that people understand, A, how to report domestic abuse, how that can be done without prejudice, without interference, if that makes sense. So there's ways to access refuge, ways of accessing support without necessarily reporting it to the police, because people don't always want to report it to the police, but they do need to they may need support. So County Council have commissioned Refuge to take on the bulk of our domestic abuse work and support work. So there is work being done around making sure that our residents understand how they can report domestic abuse, and there's work being done with our colleagues in the police to make sure when it is reported as well that work is, that's followed up, that case is managed, etc., etc. So there is a lot of joint working going on around that at the moment.
Yep, domestic abuse is horrific. It often and nearly always takes place behind closed doors. It is very difficult to try to prevent domestic abuse taking place. But we do put substantial sums into supporting victims. We offer support and give finance for support for victims to go to court and get some sort of help going through the court process. At the moment, we've got this big backlog in court cases. Is not helping victims of domestic abuse. But there is a lot of support out there. We jointly commissioned Refuge, actually, with the County Council. We certainly commissioned Safeline and ROSA, which is an organisation here in Rugby, who do some fantastic work. And I think we have to encourage victims of domestic abuse to report it. I think Henry is right. It's underreported. And the key to that is that a victim will be believed by police force or whoever they're reporting it to, the third sector organisations. So it's a huge challenge. It's the one thing that really shocked me when I got this job was the amount of domestic abuse across all socio-economic groups, across all geographical areas in Warwickshire. And it's something we all need to concentrate on to try to prevent it. But it's not the easiest of crimes to prevent.
I'm going to wrap it up. Can I ask our two guests...
Just to finish, thank you for that extra information. I appreciate that. In my local experience as a councillor, and the ward that I'm responsible for has a significant population of council tenants. And in fact, all of the calls for help that I've received have come from council tenants. So I think we have, as a council, an opportunity and a responsibility to manage our council tenants and families well. Because that's my experience. That there have been a lot of issues, and it's sometimes involving the environment. But it's my experience as a ward councillor.
Apologies, Chair, because I know you want to round this up. Just to give Councillor Rabin some reassurance, our Communities and Homes team are aware of this, and they're one of our key partners when it comes to managing domestic abuse, including in our tenancies.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. New.
Thank you, Chair. I'd also just want to add that there are more than just the victims, the mothers and possibly fathers who are victims of domestic abuse. The children are also victims, and they're experiencing adverse childhood experiences, and I'd like to know how much effort is being put in to support those through the schools and to help them when they're having to move quite often from a place where they're secure to different schools out of the area that they know and their friends. Thank you.
I'm fortunate in my position. Prior to having this role, I was a Detective Chief Inspector in domestic abuse for Warwickshire Police and the lead on DA in Warwickshire Police for over 6 months before I came here. We do a lot around domestic abuse, as you'd expect, with all sorts of people that are commissioned, as Mr Seckham has mentioned. Any children that are involved in a domestic abuse report, regardless of whether it's a crime or not, we inform schools. So we've got an operation in place called Encompass, and that's what Rugby Police do. And then we inform partners as well. And through our multi-agency safeguarding hub, we make sure that education, healthcare, children's and adult services are aware when there's a report of domestic abuse. The Children's Act allows us to share that information, and we absolutely do, to ensure that this sort of wraparound around DA is visited, because we're not the answer to everything in the police. We can arrest, but actually with domestic abuse that isn't always the best solution, although we're good at that and we're so much better than we were when I joined the police. We've got a specialist domestic abuse court on a Tuesday at Coventry that our cases go to. We have recently restructured how we deal with DA in Warwickshire Police in the detective side of things, and we've got an entirely separate domestic abuse department now, staffed by experienced DIs, DSs, DCs, and we've got support services that we can reach in through that department as well. We are better than we've ever been. There is room for improvement. My figures, which I said were published yesterday, would show that DA in Rugby is down 7% year to date as it was last year. I think Henry might have something around lockdown. We might have seen an increase in a spike in reporting last year that we're now getting down to normal levels. But actually that's quite reassuring for me, because I know we've never been more open to people reporting to us. So if we're seeing a decrease, I'd like to think that's a really positive step. We've got our perpetrator programme and various out-of-court disposal programmes that we put domestic abuse perpetrators and victims through to give them access to support and training programmes to break that cycle of DA or domestic violence.
I'm going to wrap it up now. I think it's been
one more. Just specifically on children. You're right, they are very much victims of domestic abuse. We put some further funding into refuge so that mums or dads who are victims of domestic abuse can now take their children with them into a refuge so that that child is protected from it. But there's lots more work to do. And as I said before, you know, as a society, we have to understand why it takes place and really work on what we can do to reduce it, because being a victim is not a nice thing to be.
Right, I'm going to wrap it up now. It's been quite a debate and it's been a two-way response. There are a couple of things sitting on the table. Can I ask our guests, is there anything they would like for in a couple of minutes to share? I'm mindful of the time that you want to share with the committee.
I'm happy to report that as a community, Rugby Borough, I think, has benefited from the geographical split into three of the counties. So Chief Inspector Rankin is now basically in charge of police resources in the Rugby Borough. We're working very closely with the Community Safety Partnership and your officers here on the community safety teams to extract as much money as we can out of Ministry of Justice, out of the Home Office, for the benefits of the residents of Rugby. I'm waiting to hear from our bid for Safer Streets 5, and we put in $1 million. And what is really good news is every police force is getting $1 million. So we're getting the same as the Met, as West Midlands, which are huge areas compared to us. So that's really good news for us, and we're waiting to hear. But I know that the team here have put in some really good bids that will make a difference to this community if we can get them through.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say I've really enjoyed my first 6 months or so in post at Rugby. We've got some brilliant young cops coming through. They are young, like really young. And it makes me feel really old, but it gives me the opportunity to mould new and enthusiastic people to be better and better cops. We are really focusing on our investigations and being better at locking people up and putting them in jail. And I can report we're over double where we were when I started in terms of taking people to court. And that's a massive improvement for Warwickshire. We've still got a long way to go because I'm nowhere near happy with the figure we're at, but that's an improvement. In terms of preventing crime, we've got now 2 full-time intelligence officers at Rugby that work at Rugby on all the criminality that Rugby suffers, so that we can focus getting our resources in the right places at the right time, which is something we've not had for years at Rugby. And that's really shown a difference. In fact, you might have seen a little pursuit in town earlier today because we went after a drug dealer, funnily enough, and we caught him. Now, perhaps 6 months ago, the officers wouldn't have been aware what our drug dealers were doing, but now we've got a dedicated intel department, two really keen, experienced officers. We're getting that intelligence out to our cops to be effective on the ground. And in terms of engaging, we've been able to secure and ring-fence our Safer Neighbourhoods team, which is something we've not been able to do for years. And I've had a really clear steer from my boss saying, you will not abstract these cops from their role in engaging with the community and our PCSOs. And that, I think, is paying real dividends. And we are seeing a much more increase of the beat managers being in their areas and understanding their areas. This, for me, is really fledgling for us, and we need to get better. I've invited every councillor to come and see me at the Rugby Police Station, and I know some members of the Ben Ward already have, and I've got another meeting lined up for this week and next week as well, I think. So please come and see me and meet me in the command team at Rugby. And then I want to really make sure that you've got a direct contact with a cop for your area. So your beat manager should be available to you. You'll have their phone number and you can phone them. And if they're not on duty, leave a message. And then they can be responsible for anything you pick up in your council areas for any issues that you are hearing from your communities, and they can directly either address them or raise them through their line management and get them to me, so that you don't have this position where you're wondering, should I contact the police? I don't know what to do about this. You need to have a contact to call. You need to have someone to engage with, because you're representing your community and we're here to protect the community, so we need to know what's going on. So in terms of the sort of three main areas of prevention, engagement and investigating, I can just see positive figures at the moment in Rugby, and I long to keep it that way. We've still got a way to go. We've only just started, and that's my view on the position with the police at Rugby at the moment.
Thank you very much for that assurance. I'm going to close that item. I would like to thank Mr. Seacombe, the Police and Crime Commissioner, Chief Inspector Jim Rankin from the Rugby Division, Councillor Derek Poole, Regulation and Safety Portfolio. I still prefer the better one, Leader of the Council. Sounds better. And the officers, I don't know whether David and Henry, I know it's a lovely evening, but you're welcome to stay behind. So, next item, do you want... I thought we had a discussion anyway, did that or not? Just ask me Okay. I did speak to Councillor Poole in a discussion with the Regulation and Safety Portfolio holder. Do you want to add anything? I know you've given a written answer. That's why I didn't say anything.
Chair, I mean, you've got the report in front of you. The team's had the report. I'm willing to answer anything on that paper. There has questions been submitted. There's answers to the questions. We're here as a team. If they want to ask me anything, ask. But the report is there. It's up to date. And I can't say any more that's on the report, the whole 5 pages of it.
I don't know whether members want to add anything. No, Derek, you're off the hook. Stay. Oh, you want to disappear? David, Henry, if you wish, but you're welcome to leave in a nicest way. Thank you. Thank you very much again. Right. Item 6, customer service update. Report has been circulated, and Mike has kindly put a report out on behalf of the portfolio holder. And nice to have Councillor Tim Willis here to discuss one particular area, which is the call centre and the length of time it takes to answer the call. And there is a frustration out there, and all sorts of things that goes out there. And I just want to clear once, and let's start. Is the department working hybrid or not? That's the first question. And then we go on to debate, because it's not fair on the staff to hear something and to the members to clear that deck out, and then we can have a clean slate and move on and discuss.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the invitation to attend, present, and indeed have a meaningful discussion. Let's go, first of all, if we may, to the hybrid working, or the working from home as it's lovably known. In terms of the staff, full recruitment, we would have 22 officers in place. Currently, we are 4 officers down, 18%. Across the service, there are 2 officers who have opted for the 40% hybrid working. That equates to just 4.1% across the whole service. So, i.e., 95.9% of officer time is spent within the building, within the call centre. Chair, with your permission, I will go through what is hopefully a succinct report, acknowledging that members will have read it, understood it, absorbed it, but I will also tease out some additional facts and figures as we go through, because I think it's important that we look at the now, where we have come from, and indeed where we are going to and how we're going to get there. And at that point, I will hand over to Mike, who will talk through the latest updates in terms of the new system. I don't think there's anybody in the room who hasn't at some point felt frustration with the call centre, the waiting times. Notwithstanding, when we look at comparators, we don't fare so badly as indeed sometimes we would assume. But let's just park that. Let me go through the report, and then perhaps we'll come to that, if I may, Chair. Thank you. Let's just look at numbers first of all. 22-23. 78,000 services requested or inquiries answered by the customer services team. But let's also bear in mind that a large percentage of those calls are also forwarded on to the service areas, be it green bins, be it housing benefit, be it the housing team, indeed be it the planning team. So let's just bear in mind this is the gateway rather than the solution to all problems coming into the building. In terms of performance KPIs and metrics, if I can encourage members, whenever they're in the building, to pop into the call centre, there is the wall board where you can see the number of calls waiting, the number of calls answered, etc. Figures that I think we would expect to see. And indeed, thinking of what we saw at the 18th of August members' briefing, which Mike and his team released the stats for July. Speaking to colleagues last week, perhaps we need to see more than July and perhaps a 12-month, just to see, for comparator's sake, where we have been and where we're going. In terms of the KPIs, we have a 75% KPI for human interaction and indeed for digital interaction. We hit both in terms of that KPI. So in terms of the overall, without taking out the spike figures, we are hitting those. Indeed, we're about 5% over those, Chair. Coming through then, the report, and in terms of feedback calls are generally answered within 3 rings, frequently 2 rings, so we're on course for that. That's to the time that the interactive voice response, the IVR, and we'll touch on IVR in just a moment. We have the figures in the report for July, the same figures that were shared in July, but let's, if we may, look at just a few more figures. The average queue duration for that time was 5 minutes 47 seconds. So let's compare that to other business areas. Finance comes in at 8 minutes and 27 seconds. Insurance, 7 minutes and 49 seconds. Retail, 12 minutes and 50 seconds. And energy at 35 minutes and 34 seconds. Local government comes in, and depending on whether we count in the IVR, the interactive voice response comes in at 4 minutes 8 seconds. If IVR not included, this would be 5 minutes and 18 seconds. So we are close to what would be the national average. In terms of staffing, we have 3 posts vacant currently, and we have one long-term absence. The recruitment and retention problems that have affected local government for certainly the last 3 years that I recall, we do not escape and are hit by those, as indeed are many other departments. In terms of current projects, we will now be looking to a new telephony system going forward. I think we probably, all of us in the room, would agree that actually the system we have at the moment is probably not fit for purpose in 2023. There are elements missing. What number are you in the queue? How long will you be waiting to respond? Moving forward then, a new telephony system is expected within, certainly by the end of the financial year, closer to the end of the calendar year. Some quick highlights, if I may. There's a demo, September the 19th. New functionality, which will include natural language processing, i.e. will cope with a number of languages coming in through the calls. Intelligent queue management, i.e. what number am I now, and regular updates as we go through, so the frustration, do I end the call or am I going to be here for half an hour? Additional opportunities, automated voice services, and of course the biggie at the moment, artificial intelligence. What is that going to do, or how is that going to play out for us over the coming years? And there are examples already. In terms of the timings, I'm going to hand over to Mike, if I may, just to update perhaps with details of the organisation that we are liaising with and how this will go forward on a day-to-day basis. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Willis. So the new telephony system was started to be investigated in Q4 21-22 with an expected procurement in Q1 or Q2 of 23-24. Because of the lack of reassurances that we were being given by the supplier that had been chosen, we had to move supplier. And that has pushed us back to a hopeful procurement date of Q3, i.e. by December this year. We've got a final, hopefully, operational demonstration happening in 2 weeks' time. We've already got technical and infrastructure reassurances about this particular system, so we are hoping that we'll be able to go to procurement extremely quickly. I think it's fair to say that once we are in procurement, we'll be getting that done as quickly as humanly possible. Hopefully direct award, at which point we'll then be going to onboarding again as quickly as possible. We've already found funding for a dedicated project manager to push that forward, so we're not relying on our, let's be honest, dilapidated resources that we already have. We'll be shipping that out to make sure that there is no delay in it. My hope is that the system will be procured in Q3 and operational by Q4.
Thank you, Mike. Councillor Mrs. Mackenzie.
I wanted to
Councillor Barbara.
Sorry, thank you for that, and thank you for the tour of the call centre that I had earlier in the summer and meeting your team and hearing more about it. Obviously, the frustration really sits around the technology, not your team, and I want to give tribute to your team for the excellent job they do once the call actually gets to them, and to reflect on the fact that we have a generation of people who have never been in a phone queue without it telling them where they are in the system. And so the fact that it just rings makes it gives the impression of that there's nobody there, you've all gone off for a coffee break, which is entirely and totally unfair on your team. So I'm very grateful that there's a new system coming in place, and obviously wish to see it as soon as possible. What do you see are the risks of any further delay, and what can we do to mitigate the risks of delay of any of your telephony procurement at the stage that we are currently now?
Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie, and thank you for your recognition that the customer service team are extremely highly skilled, and as their chief officer, I'm exceptionally proud of the work that they do. So there are, of course, risks for the system not being procured on the one that's chosen. We've pulled together a high expectations for the system that will come into place to replace the current out-of-date one, which, as Councillor Willis has already said, simply isn't fit for purpose. The truth is that we need to not just get up to date, but we need to be looking forward and making sure that this is the system that we can rely on, and to be able to integrate, move forward with additional technologies, which Councillor Willis has already referred to, for the next 5, 10, possibly 15 years. The system that we've identified for this is the only system that fulfills that. There are multiple suppliers for that system, and we've already moved that supplier once because, as I mentioned, the first supplier didn't provide the reassurances that we needed. The risk is that those reassurances aren't supplied again. I don't think that those reassurances won't be given. But if they're not, then we will continue to look for the correct system. I know it's frustrating for everybody involved, but it would be irresponsible of me or the portfolio holder to put a system into place that is not going to move us forward for the next 5, 10 or 15 years. And if there's a delay, I will very happily come back to the committee and explain why that delay is there, and feel it would be justified to make sure that we're not putting a system in place that is only going to tide us over, or even worse, actually isn't robust, which is where nobody wants to be. 3
speakers, Councillor Brown, Councillor Lawrence, Councillor Livesey. I'm trying to listen at the same time. All right. Well, I think you're all going to speak. Okay, Councillor Timms, Councillor Farker. Thank you very much for understanding.
Thank you, Mike. My question is about communication to residents. So given, that things are going to improve because the system will be fit for purpose, we need to let people know, because the perception is, that it is a phone ringing in an empty room at the minute. And although I know that's far from the truth, how do we support people into understanding what those improvements will be and how quickly they will happen?
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Yes, there will be a communications strategy, of course, when the system is procured. We know what functionality will come in at the start, and I think it's worth bearing that in mind. If it was possible for us to bring in the full functionality of a fully modern, up-to-date system from day one, then I would do that. That would be risky, and it wouldn't be the way to go. What we need to do is we need to bring in the required functionality to make sure that we get it in place quickly, rather than be waiting for additional functionality and to be holding back from getting the new system in. And with each step that we go through that, you're right, there'll need to be communications to make sure that residents and businesses are aware of what will happen when they ring the council now, rather than that unfortunate position we're in, where they're ringing the council and actually there isn't a lot of information coming through to them until that phone is picked up. And I'll make sure that communications is robust, pushed out regularly, not just digitally, to be clear as well, that will be going out through multiple means to make sure that whether somebody chooses to be digitally disengaged or is digitally disenfranchised, that I'll make sure the message gets through to them. I'm a big believer in that.
Thank you, Mike. You've given us a really good report, and also you've given us a chance to actually ask you questions previous to this meeting. Councillor Willis, you've mentioned one of the points I raised already yourself. The July figures, good in themselves, but don't give us the full picture. Obviously, there was an issue that occurred, and those figures don't really show us that issue. And it is potential that issue is a annual problem of council tax bills, green bins, those type of things all coming at the same time, which we're aware of, and I know you are aware of. So I think that is what we need, is that 1 year run. The other thing here is in the return of investment calculation. As we've discussed, you're going to need new KPIs. Okay, so it will be interesting to see what those KPIs in advance are running, and knowing that that's what you're going to be judging your return on investment off. It's very good to hear that this new system will be able to capture the full customer journey, which I think is lacking at the moment. So it is actually much more than we're doing than just replacing an existing system with new. I think it's really positive. I would like you not to dive too much into new technology too soon. I think you'll probably be there. Derby may be proving that AI can work, but maybe we should take things gently on things like that and just get the system to be reliable and work for us in Rugby. And the one last thing, I think it's probably yourself, Councillor Willis, is let's say it's 3 months after procurement, we're going to say we're getting a system. Can we have a really robust go, no-go decision? I think the worst thing would be if we limp into March and then it's going to be too near our peak period. So if we can set up those criteria and really be a robust no-go. But thank you very much for the report, and I'm looking forward to the new telephonic system. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I've got some real concerns about this report. I'm concerned about the charts that have been presented to us. The third chart on the copy I have, it's just a blue bar. I don't know what it's supposed to be saying. The one above is very difficult to read. This is not the kind of data that I would expect from a call centre. the kind of data I would expect from a call centre would be a data suite, and I would expect to see 3 months at a time, so you can actually monitor performance over time. Now, from what you've said, I suspect that probably the system can't provide that kind of information. And that's unfortunate, but I think we can probably get average handling time, call waiting times, number of drop calls and so on a day-by-day basis, and then, you know, aggregate that up. Building on from what Councillor Lawrence has just said, I think we need to do some planning around anticipating when the busy periods are going to be, and my question would be, have we thought about trying to fill those vacancies with temps and in temporarily enlarging the workforce when we do know we're going to have busy periods? And then the third thing is, this report says there are no diversity or equal opportunities implications. I think it's absolutely screaming out that there are equal opportunities and diversity implications from it, because this is how people interact with the council. This is their front-line interaction with the council. And I think all of us here have seen on Facebook the complaints, hundreds of them, about people just giving up because they can't get an answer. And, you know, we don't know why they were phoning. We don't know why they needed to phone, but I can be pretty sure that we're probably missing out on some payments for things. So I do think that the diversity and equal opportunities implications need to be looked at again, and with in-depth, especially around the procurement of the new system.
Just through you, Chair, just to come back in terms of Councillor Liddy's point in terms of the E&D implications, fully understand and take on board the point that has been made, but just to clarify, within the context of the report, this is a customer services update report, so it's an implication around the decision-making process. But yes, fully understand the point that's been made, and it's one that can be taken away in terms of the E&D implications.
Sorry, I don't quite understand the point you're making, because the report is saying that like 76% of people are satisfied. It's not just around a decision to be taken about buying a new or procuring a new system. This is about it's also going into the experience of people who are using the call centre. I mean, it's maybe too fine a point to labour here, but I mean, I really disagree with you there.
Happy to clarify, Councillor, outside of this meeting in terms of the relevant E&D implications.
Heather Thames, Councillor Lisa Parker, Councillor Mrs Mackenzie, in that order.
Thank you, Chair. What I want to talk about is really where you've put that item 3, current position, and the July figures. I have to say, personally, I never ring the customer service centre, because I'm one of those people who like to have a data trail, so I email. And when I don't get a response, I email again. And when I don't get a response, I email again. And I've been doing a lot of that lately. So, you know, I think, you know, our customers out there have probably been experiencing the same. Now, when you look at these figures, I got it to 60.3% about, you've explained 60.3 what's happening. So there's another 35% somewhere. What happens with those? Are those people that hang up after 5 minutes of calling? Are they people that hang up after 10 minutes of calling? Are they people that just disappear into the system? And I accept that there are people that go to other numbers, not the call centre number, and they ring out in a room as well. So I accept there is issues with the telephony system per se, but also these figures are not helping, because when I look at that, they raise more questions than they actually answer. And I am sorry, but when you're a councillor, you're going to look at the data that's presented to you, and you want it to be very open. You want it to tell you what the situation is. And I think that doesn't. It disguises it. And I was very saddened to see that, because I don't want that to be the case. I want you to be open and transparent with us as councillors, so that we, on this scrutiny, can Committee can help you to improve things. Because there is a perception out there that Rugby Borough Council doesn't answer the phones. And it is a perception that we have to work on. It is a perception that we have to solve together. And we need to have that communication in place. So I'd like you to answer in full what that current position means for the 100% of calls. I think that would have been more helpful to me.
Thank you, Councillor Timms. First of all, I'd like to say I try to be completely transparent inside my reports. I'll happily give you all of the data. Everything above that is exactly as you say. It is hung up after or answered beyond those 5 minutes. The truth is that there is a frustration within the current system, which means that the accuracy of those reporting, once it gets beyond a certain amount of time, means that I'm not comfortable showing that in full. And this was the point where I thought that actually knowing the average queue time, the under 1 minute calls, the hang-ups, and the calls answered 5 minutes gave an overview of where we were to try and push, try and challenge that perception which you've referred to already, that actually calls aren't being answered, whereas the facts speak for themselves, that the average queue length for anybody calling the Rugby Borough Council customer services line is 5 minutes and 47 seconds. But I absolutely take that on board. As it happens, because of a recent upgrade in the legacy system, there is more metrics and analytics available now. Because of the lack of availability of our data analyst, I've actually got involved with that, and I've created my own report which gives better metrics on that queue length and waiting time. What I will never be able to give you, unfortunately, is the leave point, because that metric simply isn't available inside the current system we've got, which, to be clear, is a huge frustration for me, because it means that I can't tell the whole story or mitigate when I can see which queue actually is being hung up in. And that's obviously built into the functionality of the upcoming system to make sure that we can look at that, get into that granular detail, and be able to reprioritise queues, use that intelligent queue management, and serve the residents and businesses better. So my apologies if you feel like I haven't been transparent. I'd like to think I gave you the most detail that I could with confidence, as it stood.
No, I think it's me. Thank you. I just want to say thank you for the opportunity we've had to, to look at these figures, both in person, to come to the call centre, and the briefings you've given to groups, and we're really grateful for that. The reason it's such a hot button issue is because it's a hot button issue. There is not a councillor on these sweaty faux leather seats that has not dealt with frustrated residents, frustrated taxpayers who fund this service and are our customers. Now, in an ideal world, everyone would access our services digitally, they would be able to do it at their convenience, and that would level out peak demands, and they would get the response and action they needed from our digital services. We know that's not going to happen because some of our residents are not digitally enabled. And that's where our wonderful staff come in and answer those calls. We know that it's too long. 2 songs, 5 minutes and 40 is too long. It's too long. We know that. And there is a plan in place. And I would suggest that we need to shout from the rooftops that there's a plan in place. Councillor Livesey, Councillor Brown or Councillor Livesey, I can't remember who said it, but you both did. Both wonderful, but and have already given ideas for content to say, it's coming, it's coming. I don't want to talk about that. I just want to talk about the potential for when the new system comes in. I rang Jet2 Holidays 3 Fridays ago before our holiday and was on the phone to a wonderful gentleman, and after the call, Didn't get the answer I wanted. Hotel wasn't available, so I didn't get to go. It wasn't the Ritz. But I got 2 immediate texts from Jet2 saying, how do you rate the man who just handled your call? And it was so quick. He was wonderful. I did the button and off it went. What potential will there be in the new system for us to, and I'd hate to use the word rate, but for customers to rate their interaction with our staff? Because the call to the call centre is the beginning of that journey for their query or question or payment to be answered. It's not the end. And I think that if it's possible, it should be doable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. It's like you set me up for this, actually. We already have a circular feedback system, which includes SMS responses. So for those customers that ring and have a mobile phone number on their CRM record or inside their My Account, then a majority of our services now automatically respond once that case is closed, asking for feedback, which produces the KPIs for quality which are inside this report. We also ask for that quality feedback via email as well, and we also give our customers the opportunity to answer that over the phone as well, should they wish to. Because you're absolutely right, the quality of our service I'm hugely proud of, but we need to monitor that and make sure that that feeds into our continual service improvement. So in answer to your question, yes, that will continue to be done, but it'll actually be probably done in a more automated way. So if anybody engages with an automated service, they'll also get the chance to feedback like they do at the moment for their self-service forms, for instance, but they'll be able to do that on the voice systems as well. Once again, and I think it's been pointed out already by Councillor Lawrence, that will be a stage 2. Let's get stage 1 right and know that that's reliable, and then we'll add those services onto it. But yes, the circular feedback is hugely important to make sure that we're not just thinking we're providing the right service. Our residents and businesses are telling us we're providing the right service.
Mike for that, Councillor. So ladies, Councillor McKenzie and then Councillor Livesey. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I had 2 points, one of which I've now currently forgotten, but the one I have remembered, and the other one might come back to me, is it's really a short-term thing between now and the new service. What are we doing to communicate to residents when the quieter periods are in the call centre? So I haven't seen any digital communications around when we're busy and when we're not busy, because if we could push some of that bump from Monday morning or Monday to another day of the week, and just even telling people our average call time waiting is 5 minutes, but on a Friday afternoon it tends to be 2 minutes, or whatever that is, to try and encourage people to engage with us in a different way or at a different time. I think that might actually just be quite a nice stopgap communication that we could just push out and repeatedly tell people that could we call us at a different time, guys, Monday morning at 9 o'clock is not great. And I have remembered my second one, which is I wanted to thank you for the development work you've done on behalf of the Rugby Litterbusters with your app, which has prevented them calling the call centre or generating emails to the call centre for litter collection. So that's been a really nice small development, and obviously that takes away from the call centre workload. What else can we be doing with the app? Because it has high acceptance. You know, a lot of people have downloaded the app because they like the push notifications about which bin. What else can we be digitally communicating through that app, not necessarily, and to therefore take away from the need to communicate with the call centre? I know it comes part of the digital strategy, but seeing the success of that within Rugby Litterbusters, it would be good to see more of that communicated and rolled out as well.
Thank you, Councillor McKenzie. I'm going to just respond to your points in reverse order if I can remember them. Thank you very much for your promotion of the Rugby Waste app, which is a fantastic facility and very well used within Rugby. We have a take-up of over 25% of households now use the app for their waste days. The truth is, it is a waste app with some functionality which allows us to have one-way forms which were appropriate for the service that you requested. It is not a communications method apart from notifications for waste pickups, and it fulfills that fantastically. If we wanted to move to a more mobile notification type app, then the app itself would need to be developed by our third-party developers, or we'd have to commission a completely separate app. You're right, it's part of the digital strategy for us to be looking at that, but that will be further down the line. As far as communicating when our quiet times are, again, thank you very much for that. You're absolutely right. Again, being super transparent, the truth is we have had, as the report shows, some recruitment issues, which has meant that we've used those quiet times to respond to things like emails, undertake training within the teams, and find a way of filling that gap. Now the recruitment issues are starting to close. We have 2 posts out at the moment, and potentially that would mean, if they're successful, that actually we will have a full complement by the end of the year. Then I would completely agree with you that actually at that point we can start moving and communicating that we've got quieter periods, which isn't going to impact on our other workload as well. So I completely agree. And my apologies, Councillor McKenzie, I missed your second point.
No, you've captured the 2 issues.
Did I?
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Fine. So somebody did refer earlier to using agency staff to backfill. Thank you, Councillor Livesey. So yes, we have we've been on a 12-week campaign to backfill for a 0.5 full-time equivalent, and we only managed to recruit to that 2 weeks ago. Councillor Willis has already referred to the recruitment struggles that we all have within our services, but we continue to do that and will continue to do that. Customer services is, I wouldn't say unique, but every customer service advisor needs a good element of training and skill to be able to provide the right service to our residents and businesses. So we have to get the right person onto the phone to make sure that when our resident or businesses calls, they get the right service and they get the quality of service that we're so proud of. With that in mind, we do have that additional pressure to make sure we've got high expectations of the person that fulfills that agency role, but we'll continue to do so. Thank you.
Just one comment. I think you said that you'd produced these charts in the report.
No, sorry, I didn't produce the charts in the report. There's some further metrics that we've now managed to get hold of that I've started turning into a report so that we've got further detailed insights.
Right, and is the call centre manager going to be trained on how to do that?
Yes, absolutely. So we have an interim customer services manager who has only come into post recently, and they already use the Power BI reports and metrics that are available to do service improvement, and the additional reports will also form part of that. And my hope is that we'll be able to use the data even before the new system to start looking at the queues and what queues come in and what the queue time is related to that, rather than that overall, so we can start targeting and prioritising those a little bit better.
Mrs. New.
Thank you, Chair. The prescription ordering service by the NHS, I don't know if people are familiar with it, the Coventry hub, where you ring them and part-way through the call you get an option to leave a number and get a call back. Is that something that we could be looking at when we upgrade the system?
Thank you, Councillor New. Yes, absolutely. So one of the functionalities that we've made sure is going to be built into the new system is the option to simply ask for a call back. Again, to manage expectations, that won't be on launch because that's not something that we currently provide, but it's very high in the priorities to make sure that we do that, because that will prevent, that allows us to manage the queue more intelligently, because we can see what services are required and what the impact and want for those services is, to then respond to that. And obviously that's going to reduce frustration as well for those that that don't want to wait too long and have the ability to be called back. So to be clear, it will be an option because there are some that are going to want that service and are happy to wait for that service, and we won't be pulling that option.
Right, I'm just going to wrap it up, I think, because we had a good debate. It's not often we get two portfolio holders coming and doing it because of the time lag and all the issues that's been brewing all over the place. And Councillor Mrs. Timms have raised quite a clear, how can you put the frustration that when the public get fed up, they come to you and instead of being resolved, you get an email, and then you do one email, two email, and it's all to do with the call center time and not being answered. And our workload, I'll be honest with you, I got, David knows, pillar to post dragging around because it's just, how can you put it, it's taken so much of the officer's time because of something that could have gone into the call center ether, the right direction, right officer can be resolved. And some of the things that been pending for months, there's no response. And our workload, I'll be honest with you, all the councillors, is probably tenfold now. And live cases, I'm just working, to be fair, almost 7 days a week. I sent out last night, sitting there as if I got nothing else to do, And I was speaking to Councillor Brown, who said, spend a whole day, nothing to do. But anyway, we have a time. There are a lot of issues in the system. We know what they are. We have something that will be put in place to address that. In the meantime, may I just ask the councillors to be frank and tell the public there are issues, there are solutions to the problem they've had, but if you have it as a councillor, trying to help them out to deal with it, and that will be far better. And I would like to thank the office. I hope that they've been very honest and transparent today to deliver. I've been around with the vice chair to the call center. I don't like call center, sound bit whatever, the way they were, and to speak to the staff as well. And don't forget, they are suffering as well, because when there is this frustration from us, they call it aggression. I've been called, you're aggressive. Aggressive is after 10 times, you become a noisy child, I think, if that makes sense. So what I'm saying is that if the public out there are taking their frustration on the staff as well, and they do get abused. I've seen two in the, David knows, we were there, and it becomes physical, not physical, very abusive and aggressive. The language is not nice. So they don't need this, the staff. So I think this hopefully will go a long way addressing what is the shortcoming of the current system. So I'd like to thank Mike and Councillor Tim Willis and to David Stein again for the input, So hopefully, I hope the members feel that we have sort of had a chat and at least share it with the other members and see where we take it from there. Okay, thank you very much. You want to stay or you want to call it a day? Call it a day. I can see that. Mike, Tim, David, thank you. I'm going to wrap it up very quickly. It's not much on the agenda now. Can I have a look at the item 7, which is review of the live music scene in Rugby? Can you look at the one-page strategy and see where we are with it? Do you want to run it? Yeah. Just going to come to it. Lynn did send out a subsequent, was it the same one? On the, it's on the live music. It's not the same group. Okay, this one has a I'm getting mixed up now. Has got a task and finish group been set up or not yet? Not yet. Thank you, Heather, for reminding me. Okay. Oh gosh. Right. Okay. So can we approve the committee to ask a one-page strategy and end the process, task and finish report, recommends we present to the committee for approval? So, Councillor Mrs. Brown.
And I'm really sorry to prolong the agony in this absolutely roasting chamber. It's not a strategy. I don't think we can call it a strategy. It's a stock take, really, of what exists in rugby. That's what it is. There isn't a clear and explicit, we're doing this with a view to whatever it is. Yeah. It's so, okay, I can see why you need to do that as a first step, but then so what?
The officer will give a quick clarification.
Yes, just through you, Chair, just to clarify the wording in terms of the term strategy. That's just the strategy, in a sense, to allow the task and finish group to undertake its work. So what is the strategy in terms of the task and finish group, and as set out within the information outlined in terms of the topic area and what areas are to be covered. So there won't be a formal strategy that will be coming forward. It will be the responsibility for the task and finish group to set forward recommendations based upon the information that is outlined there.
Just really quickly, I do get that. It's just that's not clear in what we've got in front of us here.
Can we just change the wording from strategy to one-page terms of reference for the task and agree a task and finish group be formed? So we change the recommendations and then we all vote for them.
I will be happy with that.
We take on board. It's not an issue. Thank you very much. Right. Does anybody wants to add before we take it forward? Yeah? Look at them all. Fun in a way. The next one is a draft overview and scrutiny annual report. Councillor Raven, as a deputy chair, would you like to move the draft report to go to the cabinet? Straight to the full council, yeah?
Yes, I'll move, Chair.
All right, thank you very much. I'll second that. You're okay with that? Thank you. The last one, the works program, overview and scrutiny work program. Do you want to just have a quick look and say whether it's still to be quite a lot, because there is few bits coming and dropping in, I think, coming soon and going through. And the only thing is that the next portfolio holder, I don't know, do you want to leave it with chairs and vice chair to see what the issues are and report back to you? Yeah, I mean, I think it was good today to have both, and and we don't have that many meetings and we need to utilize it.
I think it was really good that the report was coming from a particular area and you had the portfolio holder there as well. I thought that worked really well, because it enabled them to hear the questions that were being raised as well as the officers, and it was really helpful.
Yeah. Sorry, we're not here to catch them out or make them. It is to extract, what the public wants to hear. Thank you very much, Councillor Levison.
Yeah, just to say that the review of the warm banks from last year needs to be added, and that's quite serious because we're now almost in the winter and new warm banks will be setting up, and we won't have learned any lessons from last year.
I'm mindful because winter's coming and before you know the season will be over, yeah? So we'll pick that up on a briefing, yeah, with the deputy, yeah. Right,
I can give it, I don't
mind. I'm just going to quick give an update on the, the landlord forum, the meeting that took place on the...
Sorry, Chair, can I just make a point?
Sorry, Councillor Raven.
Yeah, I would agree with Councillor Livesey's point, because I think the Scrutiny Committee doesn't meet as often as perhaps it should, and having the portfolio holders and officers to answer questions speeds the process up. So I'd absolutely support that.
Very much for that, yeah.
Just Councillor Raven, just coming back on the point in terms of the number of meetings in terms of scrutiny, it's a point that I have discussed with the Chair and the Vice Chair. And what we do recognise is that there certainly needs to be engagement outside of this scrutiny meeting in terms of the actual work programme to ensure that the work streams are progressing. So what we have put in place now is a scrutiny steering group that will meet on a monthly basis. As members of the committee, you are welcome to engage in that process in terms of any concerns that you have in terms of the actual work programme, any priorities that you want to see to be progressed. Because as I said, we are mindful that we want to ensure that the relevant work streams are progressed as much as possible. And if I just briefly take members back to why this scrutiny committee was taken from 2 committees into a single committee, it was for it to be functioning as a board and to be putting recommendations forward, and the real work to be undertaken outside the committee and recommendations coming forward.
We set the scene now. The year, I mean, it's almost 2 meetings gone. There are issues which brew up regularly within the system, and it's not to catch anybody out or whatever. It is to address, because it's out there. You get the feedback. It's not something my pet favorite subject or whatever. It is something like today, crime, and then you look at the call center and all, etc. So if you can do it, we can function as a committee in a much meaningful. And at least scrutiny should be doing exactly what it's set out to do. So thank you very much. I think what we do, the Landlord Forum met on the 6th, so just give a quick update. It's just a minute and where we are, first meeting that took place. 2 minutes, yeah? Thank you.
Yeah, just quickly through you, Chair. Just to provide a verbal update that's been given by the portfolio holder. So as the Chair has just outlined, the group met on the 6th of September. There was a briefing by the Chief Officer for Regulation and Safety in terms of the background for the review and also the reference back to the original motion and the report considered by the Scrutiny Committee. And in terms of the scope for the review, the Task and Finish Group agreed the scope in terms of carrying out research on examples of successful landlord forums that operate elsewhere, meeting with tenants, landlords and other local authorities to gather evidence, and produced a draft terms of reference for the landlord forum. There was also the consideration of an introduction of a licensing scheme for private rented properties. Don't know what that was. And consider the creation of a separate website for landlords and tenants to access information. So that is the scope that the Task and Finish group are focusing upon. The group's next steps are to receive a list of examples of landlord forums supported by other local authorities. Warwick District Council was identified as having a well-run landlord forum, and it also operated at a landlord steering group. So there will be meetings held with Warwick District Council and, as I said, local landlords and property agents and local tenants.
Thank you very much. I think that just a quick update on it. Anyway, can I just thank Lynn again? She's always working hard and always accommodating, and to Aftab and for live streaming. So thank you as a member for participating in a very lively debate. I think, hope we go forward and serve the council well. Thank you very much. Have a good night. All right, we can stop the live streaming.